the one that,
Yeah, we'll do a voicemail vote today.
okay, how do I?
We're good.
I call the Charlottesville City Council June 2nd, 2025 meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Oshrin,
Here.
Councilor Payne,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Snook,
Here.
Mayor Wade.
Here. The agenda published May 28th included an action item for council to consider approving a proposal to finance improvements to the ACRJ. Colonel Coomer has asked that this be delayed, the vote be delayed as staff and the board needs additional time to review bid proposals to set the construction costs for the project. City manager is working with ACRJ officials to determine a date for rescheduling this item, but it will meet all of the requirements and for the vote. Is there a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
Move for approval of the amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, so you do a voice vote for this?
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, the motion passes 5-0.
And, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I would like, at this point, to apologize to the person who wrote to me saying, why was it taken off the agenda? And I didn't realize it had been taken off the agenda, so I gave somebody some bad information. It was not
Yeah.
on purpose.
Yes, yes. This meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first will be a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote, followed by a closed session, then the regular business meeting at 6:30. Today, we will hear the transportation planning update by Mr. Chambers.
And actually, we're going to start with an update about parking from Economic Development Office.
Okay.
So I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Engel first.
Thank you, and hopefully Remy can, there we go, perfect, thank you. Chris Engel, Director of Economic Development. I am your opening act as you await the main act by Mr. Chambers about transportation, but parking and transportation are related, as we all know. So I'm going to focus, parking can cover quite a bit of territory for folks and certainly sparks emotions and lots of folks, depending upon if you're talking about the space out in front of their house or not. But we are focused mostly on the city's facility parking, so the 2 garages and the 3 surface lots that constitute what we call public parking for the city. This is paid public parking. So I'm not really going to be focusing on neighborhoods, permit parking, or even on-street parking per se. Just want to take a few moments to give a little update on some facility-related parking items. You all have been privy to a few complaints recently and over the years about equipment not functioning properly, slow exits, et cetera. So I know you've been hearing some of that. We've been hearing that. The city manager's office has heard it as well. So the update is really to address that and give you kind of an overall context on some of the parking activities related to that, and then some of the equipment improvements that are in the offing. So with that, it's always good to start off any parking conversation with a little humor. So my favorite humorist regarding to parking is Will Rogers, who says, I've always felt that the surest way to tell if a town is prospering is to try and find a place to park. All good humor has some truth in it, and I think that's safe to say that Charlottesville has its challenges with finding places to park cars, buses, trucks, people, and that's a good thing because that means people want to be here. They want to come downtown, they want to engage. The opposite of that is not necessarily a place that most folks would want to be if you don't have those issues to consider. So I'll just leave you with that to consider as we move into the real stuff, which some of you will recognize this. This is a quick map of the current parking inventory, the two main facilities being the two black blobs on the map there on the left, the Water Street parking garage and the Market Street parking garage. And then there are three surface lots that I mentioned, the largest of which is on Water Street. It's called the West Second Street lot. And then the other two are smaller. One's on Jefferson Street and one is on High Street. Those constitute the public off-street parking that we have available for folks to engage in, either in a monthly basis, so you sign up for the month, or you sign up, or you just are transient user and you use it by the hour. So that's just a quick kind of overview of where things are. On the right-hand side is a little graphic showing parking places that have been lost in recent months and years, mostly in the past 5 years. Some construction projects related to the Belmont Bridge, Court Square, Water Street Trail, things like that. So those are mostly on-street spaces, but that does impact the overall inventory in some ways. So we just wanted to catalog that and kind of keep track of that over time. And then there's some expected losses with future development of both the Levy lot and the Water Street lot, West Second lot, that has been considered for development some years ago. That plan has been tabled, but inevitably all surface parking is a short-term land use and will ultimately have some other use take place there. So in any case, those are future losses that are anticipated. Timing is a little unknown, but just things for folks to be aware about as we consider overall parking capacity in downtown. Just another little graphic. This is from our parking study from some years ago, but changes have not been significant with respect to what's available on street, with the exception of those ones I just mentioned. These are the numbers with regard to the number of spaces at Market Street. Market Street, in case you didn't recognize, is in its golden anniversary this year. It's 50 years old. Preceded the mall by about a year in terms of its construction. Water Street is some years newer, but not brand new by any stretch. And then West Second, 7th Street lot, and the Jefferson Street lot, which is our newest surface parking lot.
These are parking spaces centered around the downtown area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the ones on the left are all city-owned or operated and available for monthly parking and/or transient parking, as I mentioned. The graphic on the right there does show some on-street spaces and then a piece of the private service lots that are available in the downtown area, which that number totals about 4,000. This number, as you can see here, totals about 2,933. So,
You said, sorry, there's about 4,000 private spots?
no, 4,000 total, including some of the private.
It's about 1,100 private.
Yes. As of when this was done, which was 2015. So some of that's changed a little bit. The private you can't really count on because it could come and go from inventory, and we've seen that happen over time. An entity will make it available for public parking, and then once they have need for it, they'll pull it from public parking, and it'll only be for tenants, so to speak. So that changes quite a bit.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, that 4,000, and this is, just to clarify Brian's question, is just, we're looking at downtown.
Depending on how you define downtown, it's a little bit bigger than the mall, so it does go out a bit. In the map, might have shown, yeah, it would cover that whole map. So kind of an expansive version of downtown, but yes, generally downtown.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I just want to kind of set that little bit of context, and then just operationally, in case you've never seen this or thought about it, the city owns these. We essentially manage a contract with an operator that does the day-to-day management, cleaning, make sure the lights are on, the trash is emptied, et cetera. That operator is SP Plus / Metropolis. Two companies have merged to form that. So they're the daily on the ground. If you interact with anybody in the garage, that's who you're going to interact with. People come and go, either transient, so park for an hour, park for 5 hours, or they do a monthly contract. Net revenues at the end of the month, end of the year, all go into a parking enterprise fund. And that's fairly new within the last 7 or 8 years that we had a parking enterprise fund. Prior to that, parking was just another line item in the budget that actually contributed to the budget, to the general fund. The notion behind the parking enterprise fund is that you capture all the revenues related to it and all the expenses related to it, such that parking pays for parking, so that you don't burden your citizens with an amenity that you've decided to provide. You just have the users of that infrastructure pay for itself. Now, we've set up a parking enterprise fund, but we have not gotten to the point where it's fully operating and fully functioning, where it covers 100% of all its costs. To really do that, you have to do some financial accounting and actually take the assets into inventory and appraise them and do some things like that. We have not gotten to that, but we do categorize and capture all the revenues and expenses in one spot, which is a change from starting in 2018. Yes.
Are all those steps you just mentioned something that's on the to-do list or something we've decided not to do?
Since it's been baby steps on this, we haven't really made a full plan to do that full transition. So like the utilities fund has all those that's a true enterprise fund. This is a quasi-enterprise fund where we're taking the first baby step to get all the expenses and revenues in one bucket. But we do not have a game plan for actually how to do that at this moment. Since we did this, we had 2 good years, and then we had COVID. And then last year, we had an increase that we knew about and that happened that has significantly kind of dampened revenues, if you will. So there's a $3 million balance in the fund right now, in the enterprise fund. Once that gets to a point where it's like...
So they're not off the table, they're just not in the current horizon?
Right.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean,
so we haven't decided against it.
The plan is still to
yeah.
do it, but other priorities often intervene and
Gotcha.
they get pushed aside or delayed until a future time. So there's no current plan to actually translate that into an actual enterprise fund. Could be done.
Okay,
and would
thank you.
take a little energy and effort. So, okay, moving on. Current equipment, if you've been in the garage, looks something like this. Tickets, validation tickets, chaser tickets, receipt tickets, things of this nature. You see them up there. That's kind of how the current system functions. There's lots of opportunity for error. Credit cards can get jammed, dollar bills can get jammed, tickets can get rained on and then not read properly, receipt paper blows away in the wind. All those things happen every day. It's not terribly efficient. There's lots of new equipment and technology out there that allows a better system. This is what we have today. It's about 8 years old, and it's not terribly well maintained by the company that created it, because they essentially walked away from the brand about the time that we got it and stopped upgrading it and whatnot. So we're living on technology that is a little bit older, and the parts are harder and harder to find, and that kind of snowball of challenges kind of continues to escalate. So that's kind of what we're currently dealing with, and sometimes that results in images like this that nobody wants to see. And we've heard about this. You all have heard about this in terms of backups at the garage, on exit, on big events. Some of these can be planned for, some of these can be mitigated. We had a perfect storm of a situation about a month ago where there was a variety of things that all happened at the same time. Failing equipment, lots of folks, disabled vehicle, other traffic on the street. And so you get unhappy customers in situations like this where they're waiting 15, 20 minutes to get out of the garage or more. Not ideal, not something that we want to have as an experience for anybody, certainly not visitors that are coming downtown, and we want them to have a
There
good
was also a
experience.
train that day,
so they come
right?
back. A train is a complicating factor at Water Street in particular on market days, and that has been a challenge, and one that we probably have less impact on a solution than any of these others that I'm about to mention to you. So, but that did happen, and it does happen for that left-hand exit from Water Street. So change is coming. My second funny for the show today. No extra charge, but so there will be a moment when the change comes where it'll be one of those "who moved my cheese" moments. And so everybody involved will be gnashing teeth and not be happy, but there will be a moment where we can get through this and adapt to new equipment and new technology. This is just a little funny that some people still like to put quarters in the meters. honestly, we haven't had meters in Charlottesville in about 30 years, but some places do, and they're transitioning from actual coin-operated meters to smart technology and smartphones and things like that. But we're kind of skipping that step, and I'm really focusing on the garages and not the street. So this is only partly applicable, but the message is that there will be a change for the transient user, for the monthly user, once we implement newer technology and equipment, which this graphic attempts to show that in a quick fashion. It uses machine learning, AI, it uses cameras, recognizes license plates, automatically raises the gate once it recognizes the vehicle in place, so that the in and out is a lot quicker and a lot more efficient. There is a setup, and this is the who moved my cheese moment. There's a setup that everybody has to do at one time to get into the system, so to speak. It'll be pretty easy for monthly users, a little bit, not more challenging, but for a transient user, a one-time user, some will probably feel like it's not something they want to do. There are options to kind of get around that, but in general, it works pretty well when folks use their phone to set up the connection between the equipment and them, and then after that, they don't have to do it again. And so some of the benefits, we're still learning about this, and it's still evolving, but the basic benefits are a reduction in that in and out time, that friction that you have when gates have to go up and people drop a credit card in their seat or out the window, things like that. This new system creates an experience that is going to be quicker for just about everybody. Lower cost, higher efficiency. That hardware that I showed you before is vastly reduced to mostly software. So there's not in every 5 or 6 years a massive equipment purchase that has to happen. So the in and outs will be quicker and easier for folks. It's a single online member sign up. It links a phone, a license plate, and a payment methodology. It doesn't even need a name and address, any of that stuff. It just needs to connect for the transaction, and then it's done.
If I'm driving a different car, I'm in trouble?
You're not. Actually, this will facilitate that. So if you set up a user account, you can put in multiple license plates, and you can only have one in at a time, but you can use multiple. So that's a significant benefit to a monthly parker that would do that on occasion, swap cars with a spouse, get a loaner car, something like that. Pretty easy to update and just allow that. So that's a benefit of a newer system. Yes.
How does somebody use it if they don't have a phone?
It's trickier, but it can be done. So you can set up an account in advance from a PC. You don't necessarily have to have a phone, but you can do the same thing that you would do with a phone in advance of coming to the facility. It's a little less convenient. You have to plan for it a little bit. Alternatively, you can go to the office, and the office is at Market Street Garage. So and interact with a person to help facilitate the payment. There's also currently ambassadors in the facilities now. Those won't go away. Those will still be there. Some of them are on cleaning duties. Some of them are on assistant duties to folks that are exiting. And they'll be equipped with iPads, essentially, and they can help folks through the process. So it's not 100% self-serve, but it is designed to kind of move away from, years ago, we used to have people in booths, like all day in several booths, and we've gotten away from that. Now we just have a floating ambassador. We'll continue that going forward for some time, for sure. So there'll be a person with an iPad that can help facilitate exit. They can also send you a bill if you don't have any means of connecting. And it's a little bit of an honor system, and honestly, we have that now, where there's people that have a situation where they say, I can't pay today. And so they get information from them, and they follow up with them. Some of those you get, some of those you lose. It's kind of a normal part of the business. But this system will also allow that follow-up after exit. And it doesn't delay the exit like the current situation does. When somebody can't pay and that everybody's backing up, it'll say, okay, you have a promise to pay tomorrow, and we'll raise the gate, let you out, and then hope to follow up with that individual the next day for payment.
So Chris, as you all are thinking about this system, think of kind of worst case scenario, like a Saturday night, older couple who may not be as tech savvy, or someone like me who had IT come in before the meeting today to help out, but they don't know, and they're there at Live Arts to see a show or something. They just may not know about this. They're expecting to come the old-fashioned way, and so that is the type of thing that, as you all are implementing this, that we want to make sure that there's ways that we're addressing. Sounds like it's a way, but that someone should be there, or there's a way when they're leaving at 11:30 that it's a way for them to get out if there's an issue or something.
Yeah, and we fully expect, and you can't prevent all of that, but we will anticipate as much as possible with our partner that will actually implement this, and hope to capture the majority of folks. The other opportunities here, and we have on-street parking, as you all know, and other options for people who really don't want to do this. They don't have to. We're not going to make anybody do it, but it is the predominant, most of the spaces, as I showed you before, about 1,500 spaces in the two garages, are going to be there. So many will take advantage of it. Hopefully they'll find it user-friendly. Some will not, and we'll work with them on that. But the alternative is further failing equipment.
So it requires
we
an
don't
app?
really want that. It does not require an app.
So linking the phone number and the license plate and the payment info, how does that all?
Yeah,
So it's like a website you do?
QR code in the facility that folks snap, and that takes them to a spot where they put in their license plate. I actually did this the other day. I got a full demo of the facility of this equipment in operation, and it takes about a minute to set up the thing. You punch in your plate. It actually pre-populates your plate if you've entered the facility, because it's already snapped a picture of your plate. So you just enter the first two, and it'll enter the rest for you, provided there's not too many others in there with similar numbers. And then you just put in a payment method, which generally needs to be a credit card, or they are moving towards accepting things like Google Pay and Apple Pay, but a credit card, which you can either take a picture of or punch the numbers in.
It's basically like if you park in the lot right now, where they have the, excuse me, the markets, the lot that's right in front of the garage, the Water Street garage, the air garage, you just come in and.
It's probably similar. I haven't used that one myself, but it's probably very
You
similar.
don't even have to use like Park Mobile.
Well, perhaps to Juan's point, so you mentioned in the past we used to have, just the old school parking lot attendants, which was a kind of fail-safe system. In addition to, creating some small amount of local jobs, it was just simpler. Is any of this even saving that much more money compared to that system? Because maybe I'm just a Luddite, but when I hear this, it just seems to me like another instance of technology making people's lives slightly more inconvenient and not providing the cost savings or convenience benefits that are promised. I mean, are these savings really that significant compared to just the old school system of having someone there as a parking lot attendant, especially when you factor in these upgrade cycles? I mean, we were promised this technology. I remember when we first switched away from parking lot attendants, and now we're back here, like that system isn't working and needs a full upgrade. I just wonder about that.
Well, yeah, no, it's a good question. When we transitioned to the current equipment we have now, there were more attendants than there are now. So we did reduce some of the attendants over time. So there's now one in each facility, 8 hours a day for sure. Some heavy weekends, there's some additional. There used to be staff basically 18 hours a day, multiple shifts in each of those positions. So there was a reduction in the booth attendant, and that booth attendant became an ambassador that can roam and help people at the pay-on-foot station, or help people at exit, or help people at entry. We still have that situation. We will still continue that. So we really won't be changing staffing that much. The real savings is in the equipment costs. The last time we did the equipment upgrade, it was, for both garages, it would have been on the order of about $500,000. So we'll not have that every 5 years, so that's a significant savings. The new equipment is essentially cameras and a computer.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, and
much less.
to your point, I mean, you know, we originally switched away from much, you know, primarily relying on parking lot attendants. Anyway, I just wonder, you know, if
Yeah.
the extent to which sometimes the way that it was done already worked, and we're just kind of needlessly introducing technology. But anyway,
Is there pushback about the, like, license plate reader aspect of it all?
I'm sure some could be concerned about that in terms of, you know, somebody seeing their plate, but they're out in public and, you know, license plates are public, so.
I guess what happens to the data that this software is collecting?
Yeah, it's only used for the payment, you know, cycle. So once it's paid,
Is it deleted? Is it stored? Is it
details
recorded and used for
we need to,
studying things?
we need to clarify. And each agreement with each municipality or operators probably slightly
Again,
different.
like Air Garage, I mean, they keep your stuff. I mean, they keep your information. If you go park in that lot right now, and the one, again,
Where?
trying to come up with the name of it, if you can go back to the map.
It is Air
but
Garage. Yeah,
It's the one that's
yeah.
right in front of the.
It's where the city
Water
market
Street
currently
Garage.
takes
Yeah, where the
place.
city market is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it,
or anything with Park Mobile or Pay Mobile.
yeah, yeah. You just, if you park there before, you basically take your phone and you scan the QR code that's on the post there, and it takes you to a website, not an app.
I can park wherever I want.
I know.
Yeah, no, you're
Yeah,
right, yeah.
and it just takes you to the website. So like Park Mobile is an app you have to download, but this is, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna park there, you've gotta be willing to give up that piece of privacy. So,
Would it then be readable by Flock or Peregrine?
I think anything that's in the cloud could be at some point, but no, I don't think there's any connections.
There's
to-
no
to
connection
that,
between
but,
the
yeah.
two that I'm aware of.
And my guess is that there's a connection between Air Garage and the local towing trucks. Because one time I was like 10 or 15 minutes late, I was at an event, and I'm like just a little bit late. This was when that same garage was under the Park Mobile regime. And boy, they had pulled my car out, nothing flat, so. Anyway, someone has this information, otherwise they wouldn't be able to enforce it. So.
I think that was the last slide. Yes, it was. So just wanted to give you a preview of that and a little context on current situation and issues regarding the equipment that is in our current facilities. And
Does this come before us for like a vote, or is it just something that the parking team does and it is what it is?
yeah, no plans to come for a vote, but it's something we're moving forward on. Don't
Okay,
have
so
a
this is
date
just,
or
this is
time,
what's happening next, FYI.
generally.
Got it, okay.
Just a comment, maybe I misunderstood your earlier remark, but for those of us who are not entirely comfortable with these devices, just tell me that I don't have to worry about an app because there's always a QR code available is not a help.
Okay. If you're a monthly parker, you won't have to worry about the QR code. Once you're set up,
I am a monthly parker and I'll be cool with that, but I'm assuming that there are people who are coming to concerts and so on. And I particularly think of people who come to some of the classical music concerts and the opera and so on, who tend to be older, tend to be less computer savvy, less mobile phone savvy. And I have visions of them getting enormously frustrated.
I would agree with that. And it's not a sizable population, but I mean, there are also people who don't have smartphones.
okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now for the main act.
All right, so good afternoon, council. I'm Ben Chambers. I'm the city's transportation planning manager.
You're going to help us understand why we don't have to have parking decks, right?
I'm going to give you some other options,
Okay.
in addition to the parking options. So usually I come before you in the spring and give an update on what we're doing with transportation planning. I'm a little late this year because I came before you in January and February to give you some updates on transportation planning. So some of this may sound a little bit familiar, but there are some updated information in this presentation. So first, I'm going to give you an agenda of what we're covering, just so you kind of understand how many things I'm going to try to cover, so you understand how quickly I'm talking, and maybe that helps give you an indication of when to jump in and ask questions. So I have this divided into two different parts. I sort of thought of this in terms of, I do a lot of work with planning infrastructure. That's where are we putting things on the ground. And then I also do a lot of work with my team looking at programming. What kind of things are we putting out on the street? How are we promoting people using different modes of transportation? So those are sort of the two different realms that I work in and that my team works in. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things underneath that, starting with the Safer Streets strategy, and I'm just going to jump right into it. Where are we putting stuff that we want to invest in? How are we making sure everybody has mobility with our investments in new infrastructure? Well, first, we are looking at this sort of comprehensively now. We are using a three-phased approach for determining how we can make streets safer within our community over the next 5 years. This includes work that we've already been working on to date, trying to contextualize that into this new strategy so that it is cohesive and holistic and working with new things that we bring online. So this is work that we're continuing right now. It's things that we've already sort of committed ourselves to, like sidewalk priorities, that we haven't even gotten started with yet, but we'll move forward with in the future. But it's integrating some new things and some new planning work that we're going to need to undertake. So last time I presented on this, I shared this chart that broke out the phases into, couple year increments. They're rough estimates of when we think things will happen based on funding, staffing, just sort of the way things are working between localities and regions and at the state level. We're still in phase one. So there are a lot of things on this list that we'd love to jump ahead to and talk about and get right into the details of. But first, we've got to start with the first steps, which is executing the projects that we have already committed ourselves to, and then looking at intersections that we can improve, make safer, looking at places that we can do traffic calming testing so that later on when we want to talk about, hey, how do we make this street slower? How do we make it safer for people to walk and bike on? We have some idea of what tools are at our disposal. And then in this phase, we also want to start talking about what does that process look like to start lowering speed limits. But for now, for this update, most of what we're focused on is phase one of what are we doing today in Charlottesville.
Can you go back?
Yeah. And there's a lot of information in these slides, so we'll make sure that they're shared
Thank you.
after this as well. So first, we want to talk about this term urgent transportation improvements. Is something we've been talking about for about 7 months now. This came out of the fatality that happened at First and Elliott. Back in October, we had a fatality for someone crossing the road there, and we had a very quick reaction of we need to go out there and do some quick fixes at this intersection. Along with that, there was a realization of there might be other intersections where we have similar problems. So we set about staff from NDS and Public Works to identify what those locations are and figure out, are there low-cost, targeted things that we can do really quickly to make sure things are safer for people who are out on our streets. So this aligns very much with what we are saying we're doing in our Safer Streets strategy. We are testing traffic calming devices with this. We are deploying things at intersections to make things safer. That's both signalized intersections and unsignalized intersections. And we're going to be using this feedback to have that discussion around how do we start talking about reducing speed limits. So as we were working through this 7 months of identifying what projects we thought would be useful for this purpose, we came up with about 34 projects that we could do for $500,000 that we thought we could do within this current calendar year. So we identified this first 34 projects. That is part of the package of surplus funding that we discuss later this evening. Additionally, we also identified 33 other projects that we would like to do as we're working through those first 34 that we'll be able to deploy already funded sources from neighborhood transportation improvements, safe routes to school, bicycle infrastructure. We have funds that we can use for quick builds in all of these capital funds, and we think we can basically double the amount of projects that we get done under the urgent transportation improvements umbrella. All of these projects are detailed on our transportation planning webpage. It's a long list of a lot of different things. So what is on this list? New crosswalks, flex posts, reflectors. You may have seen some of the no right turn on reds that are popping up at some of our intersections. Those are actuated by the push buttons that the pedestrians at the intersection use. So if there's no pedestrians.
So that's like at the Rose Hill, Preston?
I think that might be one. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, Rose Hill
Nice.
Preston is one of those locations. So when there's no pedestrians, you can turn right on red, but as soon as somebody walks up to that intersection and pushes the button, it becomes a no right turn on red intersection.
Nice.
We're also looking at some more rapid flashing beacon locations, some locations to test mini roundabouts to slow down traffic, bump outs and chicanes to do the same. We are adjusting some slip lanes at some intersections where that's a dangerous place for people to cross. We're adding some bike boxes. We are defining some parking lanes and some driving lanes so that people know about how wide their drive aisle is actually supposed to be and they don't take up, the whole road as they're speeding down the road. And we're also testing speed tables and speed cushions at locations across the city. These are in neighborhood streets where we want people to be going slow. We also know there's not a lot of traffic volume, so it allows us to responsibly test these temporary measures and also get feedback from folks like the transit department and the fire department to make sure that this isn't affecting their vehicles.
While we're on this, could I ask you, rapid flashing beacons?
Yeah.
I take it that's the RFB that appeared in the document that we received?
Yes.
I was thinking request for bid, and that didn't make any sense, so.
I think the actual acronym is supposed to be RRFB, but in our list, we put RFB because we were just using shorthand. But yeah, that's what that is. It's when you're crossing the intersection, you can push the button and it'll light up those flashing lights like we have over on Ridge McIntyre at the McDonald's at that crossing.
I see.
Yeah, so we're going to have quite a few more locations that have that.
Visuals.
Yep.
Years ago, they put them down in the actual street, and I understand that became difficult to maintain and a whole range of problems, but now they're up. I mean, if you're driving sort of at this level.
Right. The other thing that is not on the list but did come up as part of our discussion and has become possible with some of the new traffic signaling software that we have is the implementation of leading pedestrian signal intervals. And what that means is when you're at a stoplight, when the traffic light changes, it changes first for the pedestrian. They get to go out into the street, get into a visible location before the cars get to go out into the street, so that when cars are turning, they're more visible, the pedestrian is more visible. This has been implemented citywide and has been a thing that we've been pushing on for a few years to get done, and now that we have the software to do it, we've done it pretty much immediately. To talk about one thing that's not on the list, I'm going to bring up our city engineer, and he's going to walk through this one specific intersection and talk about why this is not included as part of our quick build list. So Brendan Duncan, our city traffic engineer, or city engineer.
Good evening, council. Brendan Duncan, city engineer. Second and Elliott, again, this is one that has been talked about at council, both to you and by the public. We did review this request that came in shortly after the fatality there at First in Elliott. We looked at it. The intersection is characterized by excessive speed on Elliott, as well as poor sight lines and the lack of ADA infrastructure. Adding the crosswalk would not necessarily improve safety conditions, and in some instances could make it, more hazardous by encouraging pedestrians at an intersection that doesn't have all of the safety infrastructure that First Street does or that Sixth Street does. So in conjunction with those two, and again, given the range of 67 kind of urgent priority projects that we're working on, this one, the limited pedestrian utilization at this intersection in conjunction with the amount of money that we would need to spend to actually make this crossing feasible, just doesn't have it as high on the priority list as the other ones that we're working on. It's not to say that we can never install one here or that we won't ever install one here. It's just that it's not high on the priority list at this time. There's definitely things that would have to happen at this intersection before we could install anything.
Like what?
First of all, like, we would have to do something to either reduce speed or increase the sight distance in some way. Also, there's no ADA ramps or anything at that intersection in order to get the stuff across there, so both of those are must-haves in order to do it. Other things, we may have to put another rapid flashing beacon here, even though we have one just up the road at First Street. When we were doing, some counts and stuff there, the utilization of this intersection relative to the other two is probably around half, if not less, than the other.
Relative to the other, which other two?
Sorry, at First Street, where
And
the
Sixth.
incident happened in October, where we've installed the rapid flashing beacon and where we've, put the flex posts out there to kind of narrow the travel lanes, as well as Sixth Street, where there's a traffic signal and a full pedestrian, stuff there. One of the recommendations that's not necessarily in here, but we're looking at doing is, installing some kind of pedestrian walkway across the frontage of Ix, because that's really one of the barriers there is, people are either having to walk in the bike lane or through the parking lot. There's a crosswalk there, but there's not really a good pedestrian route, from there to First Street. So that's something that we're looking at. Right now, it's not on that list of, 33, 34 projects, but it's something that we're definitely looking at doing to help with this area in general. Getting it on the east side of this intersection is more difficult. So between First Street and Sixth Street on the north side of the road, there's not really room to install a sidewalk there or pedestrian way without removing parking. Some of those houses have their own parking, some of them do not. And so there's just a larger discussion that needs to happen about how we would accommodate that at some future time.
Thank you.
But
So the street that's been made such a big deal about is the Second Street crossing
Correct.
that people want. And we have up at Sixth, that's actually an intersection with a light.
yeah,
And
traffic
then-
signal and audible pedestrian signal.
And then at First, that has our FBs.
Yes, rectangular rapid flashing beacon.
Okay, fantastic. And the point that you've been trying to make is that you don't see how you could make the Second Street Southeast, which actually connects to Ware on the other side of the road.
Correct, to Ware Street on the south
You
side.
don't feel like that we could do that in a way that it would require significant investment to truly make it a safe crosswalk. You'd have to have our FBs and work on the sidewalk and so-
possibly, we may even have to remove the parking just to get the sight distance
I
that's
see.
required, because
Okay.
it's close to a 10% grade coming down, so
Yeah.
you need roughly 280 to 200 to 300 feet of sight distance
I
there.
see.
And when vehicles are parked there, it's nearly impossible to see somebody who would be waiting. Even if they were waiting in the bike lane, it would be hard for them to see, let alone off on the sidewalk.
I see, okay.
And the other problem is that if there's a car that has had to stop for that pedestrian, that cuts another 20-some feet out of your sight distance as well, because, or at least of the stopping distance. You don't have as much room for the next car coming down the
Right,
hill.
I mean, theoretically, if there's a car behind the car that's stopping, they should be accounting for enough space for them to stop for the vehicle in front of them. But yes, that, and anecdotally, standing out there and watching, like, I mean, again, people do cross there, I'm not saying that they don't, but there's enough gaps in the traffic that, pedestrians rarely have to wait more than 20 or 30 seconds to cross, either before there's a gap or before a car just slows down and stops and allows them to cross, even though there's not a marked crosswalk.
So,
But what we-
Brian, Natalie had her.
Yeah.
Since it's a pretty straight road, can you explain a little bit more about the sightline limitations?
Yeah, so it's the sight distance from where the driver is seated to where the pedestrian is waiting on the ramp before they enter the roadway. So when you have vehicles that are in the parking lane there, the distance, especially with how far set back the current roadway and the sidewalk is, like you just can't see see them as
So
they're
like
approaching.
daylighting at the corners, a bump out for the
Well,
pedestrian would be things that would help overcome that problem?
That could, but then we would have to lose bike lanes and that kind of stuff that are there as well. So there's a give and take with all of this, and it just seems with the proximity, I mean, VDOT wouldn't even consider it if it was under 300 feet, and we're at 310 feet, so we're like just barely at that threshold where VDOT would even consider putting a crosswalk in, just based on the proximity to another crosswalk. And, you know, with the enhancements that we put at First Street and the current, you know, condition of Sixth Street where it's a fully audible pedestrian signal there and vehicles have to stop, you know, as the pedestrian crosses, you know, in conjunction with the fact that there's only 17 houses that this directly serves, every other house has to walk past either First or Sixth Street to get to this intersection.
And I'm looking at Street View, this is from August 2023, so a couple years ago. But on this south side of Elliott, in between First and Second, there's a pretty healthy invasive species issue, and a lot of the plants are encroaching pretty significantly on the sidewalk. I don't know what it looks like out there today, but is that something that our team has taken into consideration?
Yeah, it's been cut back. It's one of those that Parks and Rec just has to kind of keep up on. You know, if people are out there and they notice there's an issue, please put something in my Seville and they'll go out there and take care of it. But yeah, Parks is aware of the issue and they're trying to take care of it. And like I said, we're working on putting something on the north side as well that would act as an alternate route for that.
Yeah, I think that's that north side of Elliott. There's a lot of these houses have a fence and then a space for a sidewalk that I assume is city right of way, and then the street.
Yeah, but it's only about 3.5 feet and it's not wide enough to actually put the sidewalk there.
Yeah, so for people who are, say, trying to get to Ix and they cross at 6 or they cross at First, there's not sidewalk for them to use to get down to that Second Street.
So if you're trying to get to Ix from Sixth Street, you
You
just
go and
continue
then
walking down Sixth
Sixth
Street
and you
and
go in
walk
from the
down.
upper edge,
Yep,
yeah.
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 So yeah, there's almost as many people that were walking in the parking lane, or walking in the bike lane or through the parking lot to get down to that Second Street intersection as actually crossed at the intersection. So there's definitely, you know, people who are trying to get down there, but I don't know that, you know, marking that crosswalk is gonna stop the people from walking down the parking lane or walking in the bike lane or whatever, so.
And how much does it cost to install a rapid flashing beacon?
They're about $25,000, I think, for the pair.
You mean one on each side?
For one on each side. For First Street, again, because of the site distance issues, we actually had to install a kind of a one before it so that, you know, you can actually see it as you're coming down the hill. So there's actually a rapid flashing beacon at Second Street for the First Street crossing in advance of it, so that when you activate it at First Street, that the one at Second Street turns on. So again, it gives more time for those drivers that are coming down the hill to realize there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk up ahead.
Right.
So something similar might have to be in place if you were to do something at Second Street as well.
And if we wanted to build that sidewalk on the north side of Elliott, you said there's just about 3.5 feet, and like the 2010 standards are 3 feet, but the new 2019 standards are 4 feet?
Yes and no. So the old standard, you could go down to 3 feet for a narrow section to go around a power pole or something like that. The overall width of the sidewalk, even in the old standard, was still 4 feet. But the new standard says that you can't even go down for a fire hydrant or power pole. You have to maintain the 4 feet for the entirety of the sidewalk.
Gotcha. And so in order to do that here, we would either have to take a little bit of land from folks or take a little bit of street from cars.
Correct. And if we took it from cars, then there's not enough width to, we would either have to lose a bike lane, the climbing lane for the bike lane, or we would have to lose the parking lane. So, you know, those are all discussions about what we may be able to do, but all of those different things have to happen before we can install something.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, and then I'll come back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think obviously, you know, this is used as a residential street a lot, and then you have the Ixart Park, and then with the CRHA redevelopment, I think there's going to be even more use for those purposes. I appreciate putting it in the wider context of, you know, the real problem with when the tragic death occurred, they were in a crosswalk. The real problem is the width of the road, the length, the lack of lighting, and I think that are really key points of what it would look like to make it more like a residential road. And I'll be upfront, I'm fine for it to move in that direction of being less like a cut-through and more treated more as a residential road. Two questions. One, and you may have already just touched on this, but to me it seems like one of the big issues is just the road is so wide, which really encourages drivers who don't care to speed. And I know there are other roads in the city that are much narrower, some that still have on-street parking, but are just much narrower. What would it take and look like to get it to be that narrow? And is the core of it really the trade-off of having, if it's narrowed, having to choose between off-street parking or a bike lane? Because I just know there's other roads that are more narrow that still have off-street parking.
So there's off-street
Street
parking
parking.
on.
Sorry, yes,
on-
street
so
parking, sorry.
I'm going to correct you on the residential because
Okay.
there are homes there, but there are only 3 streets that connect between Monticello and Avon, between 64 and downtown. This is one of those 3. So yes, there are residential uses on there, but it is always going to be a vehicle street. Like we're not going to get around that. Like there's only 3 spots for people to cut through, or not cut through, but to get between those 2 streets. So we can work on reducing speeds on the corridor. We can work on reducing, you know, how wide that corridor is to kind of induce slower speeds. But the volume of cars on that street is not going away. I just want to be clear on that. Like,
No, and I hear
there's
you
only,
there.
There's only so much we can do there. Sorry, I'm going back to your other points. So most of the streets that have on-street parking that are narrower are those are your local residential streets. Our standards and design manual and just for transit and everything else, we need to maintain at least 11-foot lanes on these type of streets for just so our buses aren't hitting mirrors and oncoming cars. Fire needs a minimum of 20 foot between the 2 lanes. Like I said, we need 22 if it's transit corridors. So we have that right now on the eastern portion, so that portion between First Street or really from 2nd Street to 6th Street. We don't have buffered bike lanes there. We only have the 1 bike lane and the climbing lane there. So that section of street is already narrow for what's there. The part in front of Ix and heading up towards 5th Street, that is wider. You know, we have the buffered bike lanes there on both sides. There's no on-street parking there currently. It's just the buffered bike lanes. So I guess I'm not sure what the question is, because we could take away space from the bike lane there to put in parking, but like the section that has the parking, it's already as narrow as we can make it with the constraints that we have.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I hear, you know, there's going to be traffic there no matter what, at least, you know, for the present moment. So I don't know, I'm just thinking, I think we'll just have to face the tension that with the CRHA redevelopment there combined with the presence of the farmer's market, it is used and is going to be more frequently used as if it's a residential road by a lot of people there.
And that's why I think getting that connection, that pedestrian connection in front of the Ixart Park is going to be very important.
Right.
With the implementation of First Street
Right.
redevelopment, because they can use that First Street crossing as well as then they can walk right down the frontage
Right.
with a pedestrian and get to Ix that
Right.
way.
And I know this is not the only road facing these tensions in the city, but it's gotten a lot of attention because there was a death there.
Yeah.
I mean, the only point I'm trying to make is just, at least in my mind, narrowing roads is a really important way to force cars to slow down, and just it seems like there's going to be something that's going to have to force cars to slow down that a crosswalk itself can't accomplish. And then the second question is that you touched on a little bit, but just to play devil's advocate, just because it's been a huge topic of conversation, what would you say to the counter argument in terms of the crosswalk there, that yes, the real problem is the whole length of the road, the lighting, the structure of it, but it's already a legal crossing, people already use it, so why not put a crosswalk there, just given that?
Yeah, again, it's the safety liability of it. We know that there's a sight distance issue there. We know that it doesn't have the ADA infrastructure there. So if we're marking something, then we're creating a liability for ourselves. And can we fix that? Can we do something for the sight distance? Yes, there's going to be a cost to that. Can we do something for the ADA infrastructure? Yes, there's a cost for that.
And the prerequisite is changing not the corridor more broadly, is what
I mean,
hearing.
in order to reduce the speed, yes, we would have to change the corridor more broadly in order to actually reduce the speed there.
Like speed cushion, raised
Possible-
crosswalks.
The speed cushions and raised crosswalks, again, when you get into the volumes that we're talking about on that existing street, like that becomes a problem for fire and transit and everything else, having to navigate those. You know, could those be put in? Possibly, but, you know, we gotta have buy-in from everybody on that. You can't put them on the hill, so it would have to go at the bottom, which doesn't really help the speed of the stuff on the hill.
Can you explain more why it can't go on the hills?
Cars jumping. It's kind of just the repeated stopping of vehicles with gravity. Really, it pushes out the asphalt and stuff. It's just it's not best practice to put speed tables and speed humps on hills that are over 6%, and we're at close to 10%.
So I know this is just part, Brian. did
No,
you
it's all
wanna
good. I
finish
know
up?
we've got other parts of the presentation to get to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brendan.
All right, so I think your questions actually touched on some of the things that we're going to cover on the rest of the slides, and I'm going to try to do Micro Machines voice to get through all of these. So, all right, so how are we going to be considering some of these longer range corridor wide issues? Well, first we're going to adopt our regional safety action plan so that we can have access to federal funds that will help us do some of that work. This is something that will be coming to you later tonight. It also comes along with a bonus demonstration project, which will also be coming before you later this evening. So we'll talk more about this slide in a couple hours. We're also doing more work in the future to lower speed limits. That's in part going to have to evaluate the performance of our current quick builds that we're rolling out. We're also going to have to look at definitions of what streets are. We have in our streets that work design guidelines this thing called a yield street or a shared street. We've never once identified a street in the city as one of those. So we have an opportunity to figure out what does that look like and what kind of speed should that have and what kind of speeds should a local street have in comparison. We also will need to look at some of these corridors that have 35-mile-an-hour speeds, like Elliott Avenue, like Rose Hill Drive, like Preston, and start scoping out which ones of these are priorities for us to start with first, because these are going to be big projects that we're going to have to tackle. And then what do the scopes of those projects look like? So this is the kind of work that we'll be talking about probably later in this year, because we have a lot of the existing work that we're trying to get done in this summer. Along with that, and as part of that discussion, there's some overlap with the scoping of if we want to pull all of these modes together and think holistically across the entire network, what does a citywide transportation plan look like? How do we make sure that we're not just doing a bike ped plan and a transit plan and a parking plan? And how do we make sure all of those are captured in a cohesive statement about what we want our network for transportation to look like? We are planning to scope that out probably beginning of next year. Starting this winter. Hopefully we'll be able to get some of the things off of our desk to move forward with this by then. And we'll be using some funding also identified in the surplus funding that's coming before you later. Sidewalks. So I'll jump into some infrastructure stuff that we're actually moving forward with. We've had some new sidewalks built in the past year. In different corners of the city, we have more sidewalks coming. We are currently working through designs at 9th Street Southwest, Prospect Avenue, and St. Clair Avenue, and working with Parks and Rec and city schools to build a sidewalk in the Trailblazer parking lot that connects to the Gordon Avenue sidewalk. We are also going to be working on developing our budget for sidewalks. So this past year, you passed a capital budget for sidewalks that was about 10 times more than what our sidewalk budget has been in recent years. And that's awesome, but it's based on some cost estimates that are a couple years old now. So one thing we need to do is, given some of the changes to construction costs and some of the construction costs we've seen in the recent projects, is do a big batch update of what are all of these conceptual plans that we're moving forward with for Tier 1, Tier 2? What are the actual cost estimates for these things? For Tier 2 projects, we did not provide you with a cost estimate in this most recent capital budgeting cycle because we weren't sure how much those things were going to cost to construct. So the capital funding that we're looking to use this year is going to be looking at all of these projects, recosting them, figuring out what's going to be harder than we thought it was going to be, what's going to be easier than we thought it would be. The other element that is not mentioned on this is we also have a concrete crew that is funded in this fiscal year. And when we're looking at cost estimates for budget development, we're looking at concrete crews from outside and contractor services. So there may be an opportunity that I'm not coming to you with a higher number. I'm sure it is going to be a higher number, but it may not be as eye-boggling as what we're thinking it is because we're controlling costs by doing some of that work internally. The Tier 3s are not included in this recosting because those we don't even know how much the planning costs are going to take. Those are big-scale projects. Some of them are things like a budding UVA property where we need to work with this major institution to work through this plan of how we would address that corridor. And it's going to take a little bit more work before we have any idea what the sidewalk would look like, much less how much it would cost. We are also doing some coordination with VDOT. They are doing quite a bit of study in our region right now. They have 2 studies underway, technically 3, but 2 of them are kind of bundled together. The first is at our intersection right here at West Main, Water South, Ridge McIntyre Ridge, where the former Sacagawea statue sat on the plinth out there. When VDOT came to us and said, hey, we would love to do some more work in Charlottesville, what's a good place to start? I pointed them in that direction just to see if they could. And they have actually performed very well. They are doing some great bike ped planning, which I'm grateful to see. We're also looking at US 29 corridor, the city section from Barracks Road to Hydraulic, and then a county section from Hydraulic up to Woodbrook. They're also doing a lot of bike ped planning for that project, which most of the impetus of that project came out of a grant application that we supported the county on a couple times that they were unsuccessful for, a Reconnecting Communities grant, to figure out how do people get across 29? How do you get from your house to the grocery store across 29? We have that solution in one spot of 29 that's being built right now. It's the pedestrian bridge at Hydraulic. But north and south of there, there's still a lot of safety issues for people crossing, and VDOT's actually stepping up and trying to help us figure out what that looks like. They have done the existing conditions report for West Main. They're currently developing alternatives for that, and we'll be doing a survey and public outreach around what those alternatives are later this summer. The US 29 project team, they're currently writing their existing conditions report. They're a little bit behind the other team. They have also started 2 pipeline projects. This is a different planning funding stream that VDOT uses. The 2 pipeline projects are, one is at, and that says US 29 at Interstate 64, exit 118. They are looking at, they had made some changes to the way that those loops worked in a couple years ago. I can't remember which direction we're trying. Eastbound from US 29 to 64, that loop was taken out of the cloverleaf right there and replaced with a different ramp. That ramp has some issues with people making left turns across 29 to access that ramp, so we're trying to figure out how we can make that safer, as well as make some upgrades to the park and ride right there, and potentially make some transit connections out to that park and ride. The other project that they are starting is 5th Street Southwest from Old Lynchburg Road, south of I-64, to Harris Road in the city. The existing condition survey for both of these just went live, so if you look at the Culpeper VDOT project page, there should be a link to both of these. They will be open until June 16th. Aside from this, we are also in coordination with VDOT on a range of projects. This is a map that VDOT hosts. These are all of the projects they're working on. I've mentioned a couple of the gray ones that they're working on. Those are the STARS and pipeline projects. The yellow ones and the red ones that are within the city include the Fontaine Avenue Streetscape, the Avon Street Extended Streetscape, the Fifth Street Trail Hub, and the District Avenue Roundabout. You'll notice, aside from those, there are quite a few other dots that are just beyond our border, and those are things that we're also following up on, things like the roundabout at 53, the roundabout at Rio Road, and there's another roundabout that I'm forgetting about, but they're basically trying to make sure people are safely getting into the city on every corridor coming into our city by throwing in a new roundabout. So we are working closely with VDOT on all of these projects. And they are working closely with us on this project. This is a project that I'll be coming before you later this summer, but it's one that we've been working on for a few months now, actually over a year at this point. So we've got a bike ped master plan that says we should be building a protected bike facility on Fifth Street. And over the past decade, we've had a lot of different visions of what that looks like, and some of that has been driven by, hey, there's another fatality here. There's another high-speed automobile crash that has injured or killed someone. And that has kicked up several rounds of how do we deal with this issue. And every time we've come up with a solution, it has run into issues of, hey, we put it through the model and the traffic congestion impacts, particularly northbound, are not worth the risk. Or it requires a significant public investment for us to make sure that there is a protected lane there, but that there is still enough capacity for as much car traffic as we would ever want. So last year, VDOT came to me and said, hey, we just finished all of our road diet work in Harrisonburg. We have leftover funding and leftover contract space with our consultant. Would you like any funding to do a road diet project? And I said, yes, please. We have some needs in our city. And this was one that we had, before I came on as the transportation planning manager, not come to a satisfying solution to, mostly because of the northbound impacts of removing a lane in both directions. So I said, maybe you can do a less impactful road diet than the one that we looked at several years ago. Maybe just look at removing just the southbound lane. So they have been doing design options for that. We had a public open house back in April, as well as an online survey that collected about 300 responses. Right now, the consultants are digging through all of those responses because every one of our questions wasn't just a multiple choice question. We had an open response, and we got a lot of responses. So they're looking through those, trying to figure out how to come up with the best refined alternative design options at all of these intersections. A lot of the feedback that we heard were concerns with congestion and traffic operations at two intersections, Harris Road and Fifth Street Station. Particularly some concerns about the traffic light at Harris Road and how that signal creates some unsafe solutions. Uncertainty about how new facilities would function. This would be one of the first of a kind of project for the city. And there were some questions of, well, how would I even enter this? It seems like a brand new thing and kind of foreign. There were also some concerns about emergency vehicle operations, whether this would potentially block them from being able to get up and down Fifth Street safely and quickly. And then aside from concern, there was a lot of excitement, a lot of very positive feedback of, I would use this, I would love to be able to. There were folks at either end of it that gave us feedback, folks who live downtown and Fifeville area that said, this would be great for me to get to the grocery store, and folks from Fry Spring and Willoughby area saying, this would be great if I could get downtown. So there is some excitement out there, but there are some things for us to tweak in our design so that we can come back to y'all later this summer.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of recent door knocking in Prospect Avenue area. Maybe you're already hearing this, but there's a lot of concern currently about people cutting through their neighborhood, coming from Fifth Street, getting over to Cherry or over to the hospital. I observed that while I was there, and based off what people were telling me in terms of the frequency in both directions. So I hope you'll just keep that in mind. at least the neighbors that I talked to in that area, there were quite a few people that were really, really concerned about the impact any changes on this road would have for cut-through traffic through Prospect Avenue to the park, Forest Hills Park, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, the back of Buford and on up. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely a consideration, and we don't necessarily want to say we can't do this project because that might change a traffic pattern in the neighborhood. We can also address that traffic pattern as it changes,
Right.
using some of the things we're
Right.
learning from our traffic calming.
I
And
think
we're also
that'll-
going to try to make sure that it's a little safer to walk up and down Prospect with that sidewalk that we're trying to
Yeah, I
build
think
as well.
making
So,
it clear to the residents over there that it's essentially an all the above kind of approach.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. What's next? All right, we're talking about some more bike infrastructure now. Part of that project, part of the feedback we got was how many people are biking on Fifth Street today, and how will you know this is successful? And the answer is we don't have a counter out on Fifth Street today. We'll know if it's successful if a lot of people are counted using it. But right now we don't have sort of the before and after, but we want the after to be very clear and obvious. And so we are currently working on our strategy for where we want to put bike counters out throughout the community. In the past, we have had bike counters. We've put them out here and there. They've been temporary. They've been very labor intensive because you have to go out and collect the data. The current bike counters we can install permanently. We can collect the data by radio. We can pull it all up on a computer instantaneously. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. The other thing that we want to do is make sure that this data is obvious to everyone who's using it. And so there are counters like this signage that you see right here that will tell people in real time, this is how many people are using this. It gives that feedback of, yeah, this is a real facility that people are using, and there probably is a demand for more of this in the community. So we're looking forward to rolling that out with our new intern this summer. Another thing that he's going to be working on this summer is long-term bike parking. We have been very successful over the past couple of years at rolling out hundreds of new parking spaces, but those have all been what we call short-term parking. It's the piece of metal that you hook your lock up to. Our development code update requires that developers provide bike parking, but they're also required to provide long-term protected bike parking. And currently, there is no publicly available long-term protected bike parking. And so what we're going to be doing in NDS is trying to figure out, is there a turnkey solution where we can have something like a locker or a space that is managed that, you know, we're not managing ourselves, but provides that long-term bike parking solution without, you know, burdening economic development or us. It just is a resource that's out there that generates its own revenue and has its own operations. So we'll be looking into that this summer. We're also working through bus stop amenities. We are currently working through our priority shelter locations. The next one you'll see is Midway Manor. The one I'm showing right here is Belmont Park. That went up a month and a half, 2 months ago. We're currently working through building out an inventory of where are all of our bus stop locations. That there is a little bit of a mystery to that. We have some old bus stop locations in our inventory that we need to make sure aren't actually working anymore, and we have some new bus stop locations that we want to start adding to the system as we expand. So we are doing an inventory of all the current amenities. We're also going to be looking at where can we put new amenities, where are we going to have to site new bus stops when we expand or change some of the services, especially going into some of the places in the county where there aren't services currently. So we're working through that this summer, and that'll probably continue throughout the fall. The other half of what we do is programming. So how do we provide and promote mobility options for all? What are our services and programs that we're doing in transportation planning? The first one I want to highlight is Safe Routes to School. This is both education for schools, so we teach kids how to ride bikes. We also are making investments in school zones, mostly through quick builds, but also we have some things that we're turning into concrete as well. This past year, we managed a pilot study on Belmont Avenue. There was some unsafe drop-off conditions going on behind Summit Elementary, and we've changed that to a one-way. It has become a lot safer. Before this was put in, we were hearing a lot of complaints from teachers, parents, the neighbors about how dangerous it was back here, and now we hear about, wow, it's really quiet. So not as much noise, and that's a good thing. So this has a key role also in implementation of our speed camera that has been in coordination with Public Works, with the police department, and with the private contractor that is helping us put in these cameras and monitor the speeds in front of 3 different school zones. That'd be Summit, Buford, Charlottesville Middle School, and Johnson Elementary. In addition to this, Safe Routes to School is going to be pursuing expanding our city-owned bike fleet. This is the fleet that we use for teaching elementary schools how to ride a bike. This is usually done through PE, and as you can imagine, PE is about 45 minutes, and if you have elementary school students that you're trying to get a bike, and you're trying to get a helmet, and you're trying to teach them how to ride the bike, and by the time you get them, maybe riding in a straight line, it's time to pack up everything and go on to art class or whatever. So last May, we went to our after-school programs and said, what if we made this available to you? Would you use this? And they said, we have 3 hours every day that we need to fill with programming. We can definitely find a use for this. It went like gangbusters. It was great. Everybody had a great time, except there was a little bit of an issue. And the issue is the next day when they need to teach PE, sometimes the bikes were a little busted up because the kids had been riding them for 3 hours the day before. And we realized if we want this program to be successful, we're going to need more bikes. We're going to need a little bit more flex in how many spare bikes that we have that we can make sure, that there are enough operating to teach PE, but also open this up to everybody. So as the first phase of this, we're going to be purchasing about 60 more bikes over the next 6 months. It takes about 6 months for them to get built and delivered to us. As well as the trailers that are parked at each of the schools that will be doing this program. And so this is a big fun program that we'll be doing later this year, and there'll be lots of pictures to share, I'm sure. The other thing we work on is transit. So we have been working with CARTA, that's our Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority. They, through TJPDC, submitted a grant application to DRPT to ask for assistance to determine what are our priorities as a region. We've had this transit vision plan that says we want $35 million worth of service every year or $70 million of unconstrained service every year. But what do we really need to invest in immediately in the near term in order to start building out this big, beautiful network? So we are getting awarded those funds according to, initially it was just a staff recommendation, but CTB will be meeting this month and approving those funds. We should be receiving those in July, and then we're hoping to move very quickly because we are looking at also how do we pay for this, which has always been part of this discussion of CARTA. It was really for how we raise dedicated funding to pay for our priorities. And while we have the plan for the priorities, we also need to start thinking about where are we getting the funding from. So now that CARTA exists, we are meeting between city and county staff, and we are now pulling in the finance folks, the budget folks, the revenue folks, the economic development folks into the room and saying, where do we get the money to make these expansions happen? And aligned with that, we also need to go to the legislature and say, can we get the monies to make this happen? We're aiming to do that in January 2026. We met with our delegate and state senator earlier today to get them up to speed on this. That may be a little bit of an optimistic timeline, but that's our North Star right now. Until something changes, that's the way we're headed. We are at the same time trying to figure out what do we do next year. At the end of the FY 2026 budget cycle, we said we are going to start on FY 27 as soon as y'all are passing this one. And we met the next day and started talking about what does FY 27 look like for transit. We are pulling together different investment scenarios that look at different sorts of investments that you could make, including higher frequencies, more nighttime services, Sunday services, improved Saturday services. And with all of these scenarios, we will bring to you, this is how many operators it takes, this is how many mechanics it takes, these are the other support roles that we need, and this is the capital we need. This is how many buses we need, these are the different bus stops we need to build. We'll bring all that to you as part of the FY27 planning. We're also going to be needing to have those conversations with the county because they also make investments in our system and need to be at the table for this discussion. Our scooters is the next topic. So In 2024, we had about 250,000 rides, very useful for supporting the mode share of people who don't have access to a car, can't drive. Along with transit, this provides them some access to areas all over our city. Unfortunately, that means that we're still having persistent parking issues all over our city. We have also had some issues with major turnover with our local VO team, and there have been points over the past few months where we're calling them to say, hey, there's a scooter to pick up, and there's nobody at the other end of the line. And so that has highlighted some very serious issues that we need to address in our dockless mobility permit regulations, so that if they want to keep operating here, there are some standards for them to follow. But we do actually want them to keep operating here because they are providing a service to us at very low cost. So what we are trying to do right now is update these permit regulations. We've currently extended their permit through the end of this month. We have pulled together a draft. It is currently being reviewed by the city attorney's office as well as our internal staff to make sure that this is something that we can manage. It's a big system. The big changes to this, which are probably the details that you're most interested in, are we are now going to require them to come up with a plan for how are you managing staffing? How are you managing parking? How are you managing public engagement? Tell us explicitly what you are going to do about these things. And then we will have data reporting requirements that will have them follow up on those plans so that we can publicly report out this is what the VO company is doing to address these issues. There are also some updates to requirements for how quickly they need to remove a vehicle, how often they have to move a vehicle if it's been sitting, just sitting for a while, and also some changes to how the user fines would need to be reported. Yes.
Since they're our only scooter operator at the moment, they do kind of have the monopoly on, on they're cornering the market, which means they can bend the rules as much as they feel comfortable because there's no one there to take their market share. I mean, they could always lose their permit, but, this is something that we want as a city. Are we also talking about allowing other operators to enter the picture?
We always allow other operators. And we have been approached occasionally in my time here, but they've only been nibbles. There hasn't been a hard bite.
Okay, because I remember initially when the pilot program was, Lime was here, and I think Bird, maybe?
I believe was the other one.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, one was asked to leave and the other left because they didn't feel like the market supported them and that the regulations were perhaps too financially onerous on them.
Mm-hmm. So there's a point where we can be too harsh that we lose.
Right, and initially when I was first brought in to the city to work as the transportation planning manager, one of the first things I did was talk with VO about what the regulations were, and because they were about to leave town. Mm-hmm. And they wanted some changes to the regulations, and there was some pushback from us as well that we needed some changes as well. So this is more of an update to that of, all right, we did a little better last time, let's keep going, and hopefully we can make this work for both sides. And then, to your point, maybe this becomes an attractive enough market that's well managed enough that another competitor steps in.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
All right, another few fun things I'll roll through very quickly. Our Neighborhood Walk series has been going on for about 1.5 years now. These are monthly walks on the second Sunday of each month, so join us next week, June 8th at Berlin-Moran Elementary. We are walking around Locust Grove. This past fall, we spent walking around neighborhoods around UVA, so we got that opportunity to partner with student groups and with local residents who live across the street from UVA but may not interact with UVA all that much. We've also begun a partnership with Ragged Mountain Running Shop. They are promoting these walks with us and bringing a lot more people out. We also have a partnership with the Historic Resources Committee. They pull together a one-page document for us for every walk so that everyone understands the historic context of the walk. And we're going to continue working with more and more partners. We would love it to eventually spin this off where the neighborhoods are hosting our walks instead of us going into the neighborhood. And our last walk was a great example of that. This is a picture from that. A local resident in Woolen Mills Bill Emery, basically played host the entire time. I sat back and just chilled. It was great. And he knew every nook and cranny of that neighborhood and was very excited to share. So I hope we get more opportunities to do that throughout this program. Next one I want to highlight is BikeSeville.com. This is a brand and website that we pulled together as part of Bike Month. I don't want to dive too much into Bike Month because now it is no longer Bike Month, but it was very successful. Please check out BikeSeville.com to see all of the things that we were doing during Bike Month, but also look at the calendar of things that are coming up. Look at the resources we're providing. This is supposed to be education for where to get a bike, where to ride it, how to get it fixed, who to ride with. It's currently managed by us, but we see this as a regional resource, and we're working with Albemarle County, TJPDC, UVA, the local bike shops, and some of the advocacy community groups to make sure that this is a sort of hub of information for people to use to get into biking in our community. I'm going to end here with our e-bike programs. First, with our voucher program, we are in our second quarter of that program. We've given out 25 lottery winners each quarter. When they win the lottery, they get a voucher for a $1,000 voucher that they can take to a local bike shop and get an e-bike. We've gotten some feedback on this program, and a lot of it has been positive. We've had a lot of people sign up for these, about 1,000 people each round. The first round being in January, the second round starting in April. The biggest feedback we've gotten is there are a lot more people smiling when they come to the NDS permit desk. When people come to our desk and ask for free money, it tends to change the vibe. It has also changed what people are asking for in the bike shops. A lot of our bike shops have catered to more high-end users who are biker guys. This has brought in a different crowd, and it has really changed the demand in their bike shops, and they are noticing it because they all get to see the spreadsheet of where the vouchers are going, and they are seeing the vouchers are going to where the cheap bikes are. And so if you're closer to that $1,000, you're getting more of those vouchers as a local bike shop, and the bike shops are starting to respond. They are starting to bring in new brands that are lower cost brands that may be more accessible to more people. And lastly, there are a lot of applications that we're getting from county residents, which may indicate that they might want to have a similar program, but also from city employees who are not eligible for this lottery, which may indicate that there is some demand from city employees for this as well. And our last thing that I want to tack on to that program is the sister program that we're working on with the Office of Sustainability, Office of Social Equity, and Department of Social Services. This is taking funds from our separate programs and putting them together so that we can put bikes directly in the hands of people. This isn't a voucher. This is, here's a bike. I know this is going to get you to work, get you to doctor's appointments, get you to, whatever you need to do in our community, aimed at people who have financial barriers so that they're not left out of this opportunity and option for mobility. So with that will be my last one. I got you 2 minutes left.
So, Michael, I'll start with you, sir. You have any questions or comments?
Just one comment on the legislation for CARTA. I do think it'll be important to get that in for this upcoming General Assembly session, because we've definitely seen it can take a couple sessions for our legislation to finally make it out of committee. And I'll just also say, I hope the community understands with this presentation, big picture, there's a lot of bike ped infrastructure that has to be improved, and people come to us all the time with legitimate complaints, and they're upset because it's not immediately responded to. But I hope the community can understand that, as of 2022, not that long ago, we had gone through 20 different department heads, not just in the city manager's office, but citywide. That has an impact on public works, engineering, NDS, ability to do long-range planning. And for us to actually fix that big picture problem, we have to step back and prioritize and act this way. We can't, if we're only responding to everything that comes up to us as an emergency, we're going to be unable to have the space to do the big picture transformation. So, and it doesn't mean the community's not going to see things that we miss and we don't need their input, but I hope the community can see, the big picture of what's happening.
Yeah, I want to kind of emphasize a couple of things Michael said. As you mentioned, our sidewalk budget was 10 times what it was previously, which means it is something that had been neglected, and now we are focusing on it, which is excellent to hear, and helping kind of get us out of triage. we are several decades behind of underinvestment. So it's going to take a while to get ahead and not just be catching up. But you got to go through the catching up phase in order to get to the getting ahead phase. So it's going to take a second. There's just so much to be excited about here. And one of the reasons why I like a lot of one of the exciting things about this is a lot of times we hear that the only contact people have with the government is when they pay their taxes. And so they have this kind of negative impression. And when you do infrastructure projects, that is something visible that people get to see. Those kinds of safety improvements, accessibility improvements, this is a way that people are interacting with their government in a positive way. So it's good to kind of get that feedback out in the community, that kind of positive advertising for government. Like, we are working on things for you that will help. So that's another just kind of added benefit to infrastructure projects like this. And then for the bike accessibility program that you mentioned right at the end, I just want to kind of compare that to two things that happened to me in the last couple of weeks. One is I had to buy some new chain grease for my bike. It was $12, and I also had to get an oil change for my car. It was $65. And so the cost of buying these two getting around tools is very different, and the cost to maintain them is very different. And if you're within the city trying to get somewhere else within the city, a bike is fast, easy. We're working on making it a lot safer and more comfortable, and more equitable in so many ways. So very cool that there are so many things that the city is working on to make that better for everybody. Thank you so much.
Lloyd?
I got nothing. I have my questions as we went along.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Natalie and Michael had to say. I just really am so impressed with the whole team here in terms of pulling together a plan and beginning to execute on it. I mean, I'm seeing real, forgive the term, concrete things occurring, concrete results, and so that makes me really excited. And I think it goes back and it speaks to the city manager's notion of discipline. Let's come up with a plan. Let's develop a plan. Let's stick to it, and let's execute it. I think we're finally beginning to see where we have enough resources, both in terms of money and human beings, to actually get these things done. It makes me really excited. We get feedback. I mentioned the Rose Hill intersection earlier, and to have someone continue to ask you what's up with this, why is it taking so long, this is dangerous, and then you see that it's fixed, that is a really rewarding thing. So I want to thank all of you.
Yep. In light of time, I'm just excited. Brought back some memories from my time as planning. I want to jump back into the game a little, but that's it.
Well, you got time now. You're retired,
No.
so you can have him moonlight for you.
Yeah. So thank you all so much. It's exciting to see, the city moving forward with these efforts, and we have the capacity to do it. It's great. Did you put up the Jesus finger there? Oh,
Out the door. Sorry, it wasn't about here, sorry.
Okay, so we're going to closed session. Sam, if you could put a next session, if you could see if you can get staff to work on a little heat.
Yeah, we'll find
So we're going into closed session?
Sure.
That's why I wore a sweater. I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a motion for a city council closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code? I move that the city council close this open meeting and convene in a closed session as authorized by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as follows. 1, under Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A1 for discussion and consideration of prospective candidates for appointment to the following board: Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority Board. And 2, under Virginia Code section 2.2-3711A1 for discussion of performance of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the public body.
Second?
We're going to do a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposition? Thank you. We're in closed session. We'll be back at 6:30.